All right, guys. So here we go. You should be on Unit 3.3 Digital Notes. Have those open. It's parallel lines and angle measure. So we talked about the yesterday the um, angle angle pairs with parallel lines, and we did the activity with the dots, and we had to figure out if they were um, congruent or um, the alternate interior, alternate exterior. So today we're going to, instead of just being able to label those, we are going to add in a little bit of actual math. So on here, on your notes on slide 2, it goes into the different types of angles that we're going to be looking at. And we have acute angles, right angles, obtuse angles, and straight angles. And acute angles are anything, the angle will be greater than 0, but less than 90 degrees. And a silly way of remembering acute, I always think of a cute little angle. I know, I'm weird. So a right angle, we've been talking about those a lot. Right angles are 90 degrees. And then an obtuse angle is anything greater than 90 degrees, but less than 180 degrees. And I don't care if it is 90.125, it's greater than 90, so it's an obtuse angle. And then we have our straight angle, which is 180 degrees. So on your notes on slide 3, we have a practice slide. So you're going to go in real quick, and we are going to classify each of these angles as acute, obtuse, or a right angle. So I'm going to give us, it is 7:29. I'm going to give us 3 minutes to get this done. If you are finished beforehand, you can go ahead and just pop on and say finished. Now remember, acute is less than 90, obtuse is anything that's bigger than 90, and a right angle is 90 degrees exactly. All right. So for number one, hope you put it in that little purple box right there. For number one, it is not marked with a little square in the corner, and it is an acute angle. So I hope everybody got an acute angle. And number two, it has a super wide open mouth, if you think of it like a Pac-Man mouth. And so that one's going to be obtuse. So number two is obtuse. Three has an even wider Pac-Man mouth. So it is going to be obtuse as well. Four, again, it's a big one, wide open. So it's going to be obtuse. Five, even though it's upside down, it's still got a super wide opening. So it's going to be obtuse. And six is got this little bitty cute little, almost adorable little mouth. So it's going to be acute. So hopefully you got all those filled in. And we are comfortable with acute, obtuse, and right angles. So just to review really quickly, we have complementary angles, which are two angles that their sum adds up to 90 degrees. We have supplementary angles that their two angles measures add up to 180 degrees. And you can see this angle plus this angle gives us a straight line, so that's our 180 degrees. Then we have adjacent angles, remember, that are next door to each other. They share a common wall. And then we have vertical angles, which are across from each other. And those are created when we have two lines that intersect. And vertical angles are equal to each other. So they're equal to each other. So vertical angles going across, up and down are equal. And then the vertical angles that are going across from each other are equal. Well, I didn't put anything on there. Oh, here we go. So in just a quick review, our types of angles that are formed when we have parallel lines and they're cut by a transversal, we have, excuse me, alternate interior, alternate exterior, sorry guys, consecutive interior, and corresponding. So, do new angle pairs with parallel lines have any relationships? They sure do. We looked at these yesterday, but we're going to go in depth today. Our new angle pairs have special relationships when parallel lines are cut by a transversal. And so if the parallel lines are transversal, the following relationships exist among the angle pairs. So alternate interior angles are congruent. Alternate exterior angles are congruent. Consecutive interior angles are supplementary, and corresponding angles are congruent. And remember that congruent means they have equal measure. So we're going to look at each of these types of angles and really be able to see that they're congruent or supplementary. So when we have alternate interior angles, they're congruent. And remember, alternate interior are angles that are inside the parallel lines but across the transversal from each other. So inside these lines but across the road, there we go. And so 3 and 6 are going to be congruent, as well as 4 and 5. They're going to be congruent to each other. So angle 3 is going to be congruent to angle 6, so they're going to measure the same. And angle 4 and angle 5, right here, they're going to measure the same. So if you were going to say, write it out into an expression, you're going to say that angle 3 is equal to angle 6. And then we could solve for that equation. So if we have alternate exterior angles, they are also congruent. So they're going to have the same measure. So if we look at alternate exterior, our exteriors are angles 1 and 2, 7 and 8, and we want our alternate, so across the transversal from each other. So angles 1 and angle 8 are going to be congruent with each other, going to have the same measure. And angle 2 and angle 7 are congruent with each other, so they'll have the same measure. So if you're going to put this into a mathematical expression, and you have, say, an equation here that angle 1 is not labeled angle 1, but maybe it will be angled or labeled angle, let's see, that it is equal to so if it's equal to angle y plus 3 and angle 8 down here, let's just say it's going to be is equal to y minus 1, then you can say that, well, that would probably need to be x. There we go. You could say that y plus 3 is equal to x minus 1 because you know that these two angles are congruent. You know that they equal the same measure. So y plus 3 is going to be equal to x minus 1. All right, this is the only tricky one that we're going to talk about that's not congruent. It is the consecutive interior angles, and they are supplementary, and they equal their sum equals 180 degrees. So let's find our consecutive interior angles. Well, interior, we know we are inside of the parallel lines, and consecutive interior, we know that we are going to be on the same side of the transversal. So we know that 3 and 5, angles 3 and 5, are going to add up to 180 degrees. So we have that written right here. And we know that angles 4 and 6 are going to add up to 180 degrees. We have the measure of angle 4 and the measure of angle 6, and we have 180 degrees. So if you're given measures or expressions for these angle pairs, you add them and set them to equal 180 degrees to solve. So if angle 3 was y plus 6, and then angle 5 is equal to y minus 2, then you know that y plus 6 plus y minus 2 is going to give us 180 degrees. Because we would do the angle 3 plus angle 5 equals 180 degrees. So let's take a closer look. So when parallel lines are cut by a transversal, corresponding angles are congruent. So we know that corresponding angles are the angles who are in the same spot, just on opposite clusters. So we have our top cluster up here and our bottom cluster down here. And we're going to look at these different angles to tell us, it'll tell us that they're congruent. So angle 1 up here is corresponding to angle 5 down here. Those two angles are going to have the same measure. going to have the same measure. Same with angle 2, 3, and 4. Their corresponding spots on our bottom cluster are going to have the same measure. So angle 1 and angle 5 are congruent. Angle 2 and angle 6 are congruent. Angle 3 and angle 7 are congruent. And angle 4 and angle 8 are congruent. So if you're given measures or expressions for these angle pairs, you set them equal to each other. So you would say the measure of angle 4 right here is equal to the measure of angle 8. Or if we had an expression, just like we did on the other ones, y plus 14 is equal to x minus 3. And you would say that they are equal to each other. So is there an easier way to remember all this? Well, sort of. But you have to know the relationships from the previous slides to know whether they're going to be congruent or supplementary. So if you have a picture where parallel lines are cut by a transversal, so all of these pictures that we've been working with, all of these figures are parallel lines cut by one transversal. All the obtuse angles that are formed on both clusters are going to be congruent. All the acute angles in the figures or picture are going to be congruent on both clusters. And then if you take one of the acute angles and one of the obtuse angles, they're going to be supplementary. If you add them together, they're going to be 180 degrees. And so it's also important to note that if one of the angles is a right angle, then all of the angles that are formed are going to be right angles on both clusters. So an example of this is, would you believe that you could find the measure of every angle in the picture by only knowing one of the measures of the one angle? You can. And we're getting ready to do it right now. So let's say we know that angle 4 right here is 110 degrees. So let's label it. $110. I don't know how to make a little degree mark, guys. Sorry. Okay. And it is clearly an obtuse angle. We can tell just by looking at it that it has a wide mouth right here. Also, we can know that it's an obtuse angle. It's not marked as a right angle. And 110 is clearly more than 90 degrees. So we know that all of the obtuse angles in this picture will be congruent. So you know what we can do? We can go in and make them all congruent. So this angle is going to be 110 degrees. This angle is going to be 110 degrees. And then 8 is going to be 110 degrees. Because these are all the obtuse angles. And they are all congruent. Another way you can tell if they're congruent, these are vertical angles. Vertical angles are congruent. These are vertical angles, and vertical angles are congruent. So now we have angles 1, 4, 5, and 8. We are halfway there. So the remaining angles in the pictures are 2, 3, 6, and 7. And they are acute angles. So now we're going to find the acute angles on the next slide. So go to 14. So we know that the measure of angle 4 is 110 degrees, and we labeled all of our other obtuse angles, and now we're going to figure out the remaining angles in the picture. And they're all acute angles, so we know that all the acute angles are going to be congruent, and that acute angles and obtuse angles will be supplementary. So what will the acute angles have to be if we know the obtuse angles are 110 degrees? Well, if we know that they are supplementary, then we know that they are going to have to be 180 degrees. So we would take 180 minus 110, and it's going to give us 70. So all of these other angles are going to be 70 degrees. And so we label those. So we solved every angle on these two clusters by just knowing the angle or the measure of one angle. We only started with this right here, that 110 at angle 4. Let's zoom back out a little bit. So what we're going to do is it's going to be your turn. So we're going to work through a few of these together. And then your job for the rest of the day is going to be to finish what we don't get done. All right? So let's go through a few examples, and then I'm going to turn you loose to show me what you know. So find each angle measure using the picture given. So we know that the measure of angle 2 is 67 degrees. Check. So if 2 is 67 and it is an acute angle, then we know that all of the other acute angles are going to be 67 degrees. So if we have 67 here, let's find our other acute angle on this top cluster, and that's going to be 3. So the measure of angle 3 is going to be 67 degrees. Well, we can come down here to our bottom cluster, and we know that 6 is going to be an acute angle because it doesn't have a wide mouth. So another acute angle is going to be 67 degrees. And let's find our other acute angle down here on this bottom cluster. Well, 7 is our other acute angle, so it's going to be 67 degrees. Now we have our obtuse angles. Well, we know that our obtuse and our acute angles are supplementary. So if you add them up, they're going to be 180 degrees. So, and we know we have 67 degrees. So we're going to just subtract 67 from 180, and that gives us 113 degrees. So all of our obtuse angles are going to be 113 degrees. So bam, we already know we have 113 degrees on all of these because these are our leftover obtuse angles. Bam, we did it. So what your job is for today is you're going to complete finding the angle measures for all of these angles. You're given an acute angle on this cluster for this transversal, and an obtuse measure of angle on this transversal. Now remember, if this is a lot, you can go in and make you a little box like we did and put you a little box right here. And to get it to be filled in, you're going to hit this little bucket right here and make it gray. And so that way you can cover up whichever transversal you're not working on, okay? You can do that yourself if you need that help. So What you're finishing up today is you're going to use these two parallel lines and these two transversals with these measures that are given to you to solve for the measures of all of these different angles. I fully believe in you. We will pick up on these notes on Thursday. If you have any questions, please email me, call me, text me, message me, and we will work through it together. If you do not have any questions, do not turn this in when you are finished. We will turn it all in when we get done with the rest of the notes on Thursday. So other than that, that's all I have for you.